Quite an emotional roller coaster in the Pacific Northwest on Sunday afternoon. Ultimately ends bitterly disappointing for the Cleveland Browns. Final score today, Seattle 24, Cleveland 20. Brendan Gulick and Anthony Moeglin with you, part of our coverage with BrownsDigest on Fan Nation. And Anthony, this was a game that had a pretty terrible start for Cleveland. And then all of a sudden, about 20 minutes into the game, the script flipped quickly, and Cleveland looked like the better team for sure. And it took a while until the scoreboard reflected that. But ultimately, the Browns had an opportunity to try to close the game with about 3 minutes left and couldn't quite get it done today. Jackson Smith-Njigba scores a game-winning touchdown with about 38 seconds to go, and the Browns lose a really disappointing game on the road here this afternoon.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate finish to a game that the Browns feel like they not only competed, but deserved to win. And you think back to the last 3 weeks, you look at all three of those weeks, and you're like, maybe don't deserve to beat the 49ers, maybe don't deserve to beat the Colts, and you came out of those games with victories. Today, you definitely feel like you played well enough to deserve to win that football game. And just unfortunate, it was. We'll get into kind of the details of it, but just an unfortunate way to lose a football game. And I thought the Browns played their tails off. I thought it was they competed, a gritty performance, and that's what you're starting to see from this team is that there's no quitting them, and they're just a tough football team to beat, regardless of who's playing quarterback, who's playing receiver, who's playing running back. It's a team that's going to be really, really challenging to beat.
Obviously, the ending was not what the Browns had hoped for, but I asked Myles Garrett postgame about, what the attitude was like on the sideline or what switched for them where once they found themselves giving up 17 points in the first three possessions, and you could even argue, that things started to turn a little bit in that third possession by keeping the Seahawks out of the end zone. And Myles chose to look at it from maybe a little bit more of a pessimistic standpoint. He said, look, it's not good enough that the first quarter and a half happened in the first place. It's not just that, hey, we got this thing right and played so well for basically two full quarters. He goes, we came out flat. We didn't come out with the right attitude or intensity, and we got to want it a little bit more. And he gave some credit to Seattle for the way they started the game. I think there is a little bit of this, if you try to take a step back just a second and look at the big picture. A 45-yard run on the opening possession really hurt, and a 43-yard completion on the third possession really hurt. It wasn't like the Browns were giving up 20-yard play after 20-yard play and had no prayer of stopping the Seahawks. There were two big chunk plays early on, and Seattle cashed in on a good starting field position on a fumble that P.J. Walker said actually he knew that pressure was coming and he didn't shift the protection. He said that one was on him. But I think there's a lot of people that walk away from this game going, gosh, that close from going to Seattle and taking one on the road that didn't start great, but for a long stretch of time felt like the Browns might actually be the better team in the game.
Yeah, they definitely weren't. It felt that way. And it was like you come out in the game and you're like, uh-oh, we're going to get boat raced. Like you get down 14-0, and it's like, doesn't look good on offense. And you're thinking about your offense and you're like, this is a really, even if you were full strength and you had Deshaun Watson playing, it would be a tough team to not only beat, but to come back down 14. Like, how many teams get down 14 at Lumen Field with all the 12s in that environment and come back? And you're like, uh-oh, this could get ugly. But to the Browns' credit, they stuck in it, and they come out with that drive where they just go screen to the right, screen to the left, and then a fake screen right up the seam, and it just was like, all right. Then you could feel, from my perspective, you could feel a collective sigh of relief. Like, we can hang in there. The defense gets one more stop, and the offense can kind of manufacture some stuff. But it was it was a weird start, and it was a disappointing start, honestly. With the way last week went, in terms of how the defense got gashed, you were hoping that they would come out and have answers. And it seemed like, we'll have to look into it in more detail, but it seemed like the Seahawks were using a lot of stuff that the Colts actually used last week against us, where you're seeing a lot of motion, getting our man-to-man coverage running side to side, getting our corners chasing guys all across the field, and creating seams and gaps because our defense is so stressed with actual man-to-man coverage. So some of those things are really in the weed. and you were hoping that there would be some really good adjustments and corrections to that. So disappointing how they started, but it was really impressive how they came out, after the offense started figuring out, and they just started shutting the door. They just kind of turned the water off on the Seattle offense. And that, frankly, was really impressive. I know what Miles said, and I tend to agree with him. But still, with where they were at and the situation that they were in that game, it was impressive for that defense to just stop the water and really keep this game within reach and give your team a whole opportunity to not only stay in it, but to win the game at the end.
I'll tell you the thing that probably stings the most in this game. The Browns had 13 minutes and 20 seconds more time of possession than Seattle did. They ran 20 more plays, 75 to 55. They were generally pretty good on third downs, 6 of 15, 6 more first downs. I mean, they pretty much won this game statistically in most categories. But obviously, it's not a game you win in stats. It's about the scoreboard. And I think probably the biggest thing that helped Seattle was the fact they had 2 scoring drives where they started with fabulous field position. And it's hard to defend a short field. Not saying the Browns can't do it or haven't done it before, but statistically speaking, more often than not, you're going to give up points when the opponent starts on a short field. PJ Walker, I thought he played okay. I don't want to have this dunk on PJ fest where, ultimately his final numbers, 15 of 31, 248, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, and a lost fumble. Was it a great game? No. But I love the competitive spirit from a guy who, let's be honest, he's a pro, right? I don't want to take anything away from his professionalism. He's a practice squad quarterback. There's a reason why he wasn't on the active roster at the beginning of the year. And I admire a guy who knows there's a $230 million guaranteed contract at his position. And as soon as that guy's ready, his opportunity is not going to be here anymore. And yet he's treating this like it means the world to him, and he's playing with a ton of heart. He just doesn't quite have all of the ability. And, I think there's a lot to admire about a guy that's going to go out and compete like that, because I don't feel as though Walker necessarily lost the Browns the game.
No, and there's so much, I have a bunch of thoughts flying through my head right now about PJ Walker. And one of the things is that you just, exactly what you said, you just love and appreciate his competitiveness. That's not something that's common. That guy loves to compete, and you can even see it out there on the field. Sometimes when he was running the ball there towards the end and he's lowering his shoulder, trying to get an extra yard, that stuff's uncommon, especially in today's NFL. And beyond that too, man, you talk about it, how the Browns dominated the game. From a statistical standpoint, right? And the one thing that cancels all of that out, doesn't matter how good you are, if you turn the football over, you lose the football game. And we talked about it at the front. Even if you take the fumble, you take the 2 picks, don't even take the 3rd pick or the 2nd pick, the pick before. If those are just incomplete passes or a sack, and you punt the ball away in the first possession and you kick it, you win the football game. And that's just the way it is. The last one was fluky, man. It's just one of those, you're throwing it to a slant. Jamal Adams jumps, hits him in the helmet. What the heck is that about? But, that one was really unfortunate. But we talked about it at the front. We wanted this to be a boring football game, right? Where you run the ball, you control the tempo, you control the time of possession, and you look good. That just wasn't the case. And Seattle's a tough team to beat at full strength. They're an almost impossible team to beat when you're beat up, and you got to play a clean game. The Browns just didn't, and you love PJ Walker. Everything about PJ, he talks at the end, he's competing on the field. You listen to him, you're I just want this guy to be great, and he gets out there and it's so close, and it's just unfortunately not enough in some cases, and today just was not enough.
Yeah, it wasn't for a lack of effort for sure. Actually, I got to be honest, I was not overly impressed with Seattle today. I thought they were fine. I didn't think Geno Smith played a very good game. He missed a lot of throws. DK Metcalf, 14 targets, 5 catches. And of the 9 balls that were thrown his way that he didn't catch, I think only a couple of them were passes that were broken up. Kenneth Walker, obviously he's had a pretty good success, had a great career at Michigan State. Great college career in general, even before Michigan State. Comes here and he's run well as a pro. Today he had 8 carries for 66 yards, and 45 of them came on one run. Zach Charbonnet had a 21-yard carry, which accounted for almost half of his 53 total rushing yards. The depth at receiver was a problem. Ty Lockett had a good game, and Jackson Smith and Jigba obviously made a really explosive burst of speed that ultimately scored that game-winning touchdown. I think Seattle's good, but they're very beatable, and I think that's part of the reason why the Browns leave Seattle today feeling a little snake-bitten, because they had this game and they just didn't quite do enough early in the game to give themselves the wiggle room they needed late.
Hey, I'll tell you what, you look at the stats, and there's a definite argument to be made that P.J. Walker played exactly like Geno Smith. I don't think outplayed him. But, hey, I'll tell you what, if that potential pick six goes a different way, you and I are having a totally different conversation right now, because, I mean, that hit, who was it? It was Mitchell. Mitchell hit him right in the hands, and it was cut free to the end zone, and that changes the whole complexity of the game. I was not impressed with Seattle. I thought a lot of it was I thought a fair amount was to do with the defense. I thought MJ Emerson gave up stuff, but that dude is competitive as heck, and it was, hey, DK, you get your catch, and I'm going to be standing right here ready to guard you again. And that part's impressive. I thought Seattle lacked a little bit of identity. Like, they would have some success and some doing like play action stuff, finding Tyler Lockett, and then they would get kind of off script. And I was very confused with what their mission was and what their goal was on an offensive perspective. So I tend to agree with you there. But just you get into a game, and we talked about it often during the week. Like, this feels like this is going to be a tough one, and you kind of think you're the underdog and don't think it's going to go well. And then you get halfway through it, and you're like, well, this is our game to win. And now, where we're sitting right now, you feel like an opportunity was missed to go to 5-2 and to establish yourself in the AFC North, which, hey, guess what? Now we're in a 3-way tie for second place because the Bengals now won. They're on a 3-game winner. So now you got this clogged AFC North. You missed an opportunity, and you just feel a little disappointed, flying back to the East because you kind of let one get away this afternoon.
Glad you brought up Emerson's name, because I thought he played really well. Certainly one of the guys I would consider to have some stock rising out of this game. Have to do a little bit of thought around those who may be stock falling, don't want to overreact to a game despite the disappointment of the loss. But I will close on this note. DeJuan Jones, a right shoulder injury, obviously left. He got some sort of brace or tape job put on. You could see what I thought was a black brace underneath his right shoulder pad. Came back in the game. He's going to have an MRI on his shoulder tomorrow, and Kevin Stefanski said he'll share more with us tomorrow. Obviously, the hope is that DeJuan Jones is not going to be dealing with anything that's going to keep him out for any length of time, because the Browns are obviously already a little thin at right tackle, although James Hudson came in and handled it okay here for his opportunity when he needed it to. So ultimately, a disappointing game for the Browns, one they certainly felt like they should have won. I think they're probably getting on the plane, kicking themselves a little bit, but recognizing that it's a tough game, and you gotta figure out a way to put a full 60 minutes together, because it's easy to point fingers at a disappointing pinball off the helmet interception toward the end of the game. But I'm not sure that I would look at that as the defining reason why the Browns ultimately lost.
Yeah, no question. Games don't come down to one play. It's easy to point at one play, but there's plays littered throughout the game. I can think of one right now, which it was the fade we threw to Amari. If it ends up being incomplete, we kick a field goal instead. But if he just came off Amari to Elijah Moore, he catches it and walks in the end zone, doesn't even get touched. And it's like little things like that where it's like, you're so close, but yet you're so far away. And, hey, you miss an opportunity, but you got another one coming in next week, and you can't let this one hang, because you're going to get on the plane here. You're going to start your travel, and you're going to look at Arizona giving Baltimore everything that they wanted this afternoon. So, they got a big one next week against the Cardinals, and you better come ready to play, because the Cardinals can't upset you. And that's when you totally cannot afford to let slip away. So watch this one, and we move on soon.
Yeah, and I think Kevin Gannon, head coach of the Cardinals, said postgame that Josh Dobbs is going to start next week. So we'll keep our eye on that as we get ready for the Browns to come back home down on the lakefront. Final score here in Seattle. Seahawks 24, Browns 20. We've got all the coverage you need here post-game over on BrownsDigest.com. And please, if you would, subscribe to our YouTube channel where we've got plenty more coverage just like this. We're going to talk about Kevin Stefanski's play calling. We'll grade P.J. Walker's performance today and the defense as well. It's over on our YouTube channel on Browns Digest. For Anthony Moeglin, I'm Brendan Gulick. Thanks for joining us here in Seattle. We'll see you real soon.